We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Sunday afternoon edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. By the way, we are officially down to 1 week left in the college hoops regular season. As I record, we are now 2 weeks away from having a bracket. It is insane how fast this season has gone by. But when I tell you, we have a loaded Sunday into Monday episode of the Aaron Torres Pod, recapping just an awesome weekend in college hoops. Yeah, we got an awesome episode. Okay, so we're going to open Auburn going to Rupp Arena, BTA Belt 2. You know what? That's right. They smacked Kentucky, clinched the SEC regular season title, especially thanks to the buzzer-beating win from Tennessee over Alabama. So we'll talk about Auburn. We'll talk about Kentucky, which is now officially down superstar Jackson Robinson. And we'll talk a little bit about that Tennessee win, what it means for the one line in the SEC with Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, everybody battling for those number one seeds. From there, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about the Big 12. Texas Tech probably haven't given them their due right on this show. They go ahead and take care of business against Kansas at Kansas. Think they're a really good team. And then Torres' BYU Cougars, man, they keep on rolling. They have now won 6 straight, 10 of 12. They destroy West Virginia at home. They are the team you don't want to see. We'll wrap. We'll talk a little bit about that debacle, whatever it was, with Arkansas. And then we will also talk about the bubble, which is all of a sudden very interesting. We'll go through the winners and losers of the weekend, the North Carolinas, the Indianas, the Arkansas on the losing side, all that good stuff. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. You know, this time of year, you just don't know. I mean, we might be going live every single day. We're going to react to breaking news. We're obviously doing the 3 to 4 episodes that we normally do, plus clips, videos, all the good stuff that you can expect from this channel. We've hit 50,000 subscribers. We're closing in on 51. I think we can get to 60,000 before the end of the NCAA tournament, but cannot do it without your support. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking of support, you can see it at the top of the screen. It's March, and you know what that means. We are so excited to welcome back our friends and our partners at BetUS and BetUS Sportsbook. Okay, so listen, last year we worked with BetUS, one of the great partnerships that we have ever had on this pod. I love working with them. They took us on a journey to Phoenix through the Final Four. They will be with us throughout the NCAA tournament, all of March into April. I'll be in San Antonio, courtesy of BetUS. So will producer Matt. We're so fired up to give you on-the-ground coverage. And I'm also fired up, by the way, to tell you about the incredible offer that BetUS is giving to listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod. It's that time of year. You want to throw down a few bets. Well, how about this? First-time customers, first-time deposits. BetUS is giving a 150% deposit match, okay? So I'm not great at math, but what that means, you put in $100, just $100. Listen, I know money's tight, but whatever. You put in $100, BetUS is giving you $150 free, 150% free, so that'd be $150 that BetUS would give you. Here's the crazy part. They are then giving a 125% deposit match on your second and third deposits. So God forbid you put in 100, they give you an extra 150. Let's say you lose it. If you follow Torres' bet, you won't worry about that. But let's say you lose it. Guess what? That second deposit, you put in another 100, they give you 125. You lose that, they give you another 125 for your third deposit. So it is an incredible offer. Listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod, all you got to do is go to betus.com, sign up for their sportsbook, place your first bet, and at sign out, make sure you use the code YouTube150. That's code YouTube150. BetUS again will give you a first-time deposit match of 150% on that first deposit. Then the second deposit, it's $125. Then the third deposit, it is $125 as well. Thank you again. Thank you, as always, to BetUS and BetUS Sportsbook. With that said, it is a busy Sunday afternoon. Chat is quiet. Let's get the chat humming here. There is no more time to waste. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, listen, to me, there were two mega showdowns in the SEC this weekend. One went to plan. One was awesome. One was an incredible finish. The other one, not so much. I do think we probably should start with the first one on paper, the second one in terms of how the game was actually played. I do want to talk Auburn at Kentucky, okay? So this one, listen, Auburn's coming in. They're playing great. Kentucky coming off that incredible win against Oklahoma, basically at the buzzer. And you're sitting there and saying, hey, Torres, is there any way that Kentucky can pull off another big win and really just continue to position themselves for seeding in the NCAA tournament? At this point, we know what Kentucky's resume is. We know what they've done. We know who they've beaten. Auburn had other plans in this one as Auburn goes into Rupp Arena and just an absolute destruction. Final score 94-78. With the win, Auburn shared at the time a part of the SEC regular season title, okay? So let's go ahead and just talk about this game a little bit from both sides. First of all, from the Auburn side of things, a couple things. Listen, early on, it was pretty competitive. It was pretty back and forth. Auburn jumped out to a pretty nice lead. Now, admittedly, a couple things went their way. Miles Kelly, a couple banked in three-pointers. I don't think you can plan for that. You heard Billis say on the call, I've never seen two in a row. So Auburn gets out to a lead. There's some weird technical foul stuff. Or flagrant foul stuff. All of a sudden, Auburn is up comfortably going into the half. Second half, you're wondering if Kentucky will make a run. Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? Well, apparently we'll never know because it's something that I have never seen before. I've been watching sports for over 30 years, okay? Don't know that I've ever seen the broadcast feed just go completely out, go completely dark in the middle of a game of that magnitude. And then ABC was just like, yeah, we're not going back to that. So we were all sitting there. We all had the same reaction. I'm watching the game. All of a sudden, I see, why is Joy Behar? Why is there an ad for The View on my TV right now? I was watching Janai Broome and Lamont Butler. What the heck is going on? All of a sudden, the game is out. I turn the channel. I come back. They're already in hockey coverage. So I don't know what the hell happened there. But listen, what you did not miss was Auburn running away with this and with the win. Transparently, listen, I could sit here and lie and pretend that I'm stunned that Auburn did this. You know what I'm actually a little bit stunned by? I'm stunned by the idea that people were surprised by the manner with which Auburn won. Listen, we've been telling you about this team since they played Houston in early November in Houston. And listen, I don't want to say they destroyed them, but Houston was a preseason top 5 team. They were my pick to win the national championship. And so I just bring it up because, Auburn's been doing this to pretty much everybody all season long. And again, the only surprise from my side, from my perspective, was I am surprised that people were surprised in how this happened. Again, this is what Auburn has been doing all year long. You go back to the preseason, we've talked about it, but look at some of these scores. 13-point win over Carolina, 14-point win over Memphis in the Maui Invitational Championship game. They won by 38 against an Ohio State team that is probably going to make the NCAA tournament. 18-point win against Purdue in a game that frankly was not even as close as that final score indicated. This is what they've been doing all year. By the way, in the SEC, they've basically done this to everybody except for Florida. And I just don't know how you can be surprised at this point, especially because, by the way, 2 Saturdays ago, they went to Alabama, which was ranked number 2 at the time, and won by 9 in Coleman Coliseum. So this is what they've done. It was kind of funny after that Alabama game. They were a little bit flat there for a game or two. Then they come out and destroy Ole Miss. They take care of business against Kentucky at Rupp Arena, and they are your SEC champs. So to me, there's really ultimately nothing that surprising about that result. If anything, I think the only surprise is the manner in which it happened. And let me say this really quick. It is the manner in which it has happened, and then it is the manner in which that team got to celebrating at Rupp Arena. Really quick, with this win, they clinch a share of the SEC regular season title. By the way, after the game, there was a little bit of video that kind of circulated. I believe it was the Field of 68's Auburn page that shared this video. So let's show the video of the Auburn celebration at Rupp Arena. So for the podcast audio only audience, I apologize because, you can't do video on podcast. It is what it is. That was the new celebration that's sweeping America. Okay, so I'm a little bit young for the BTA, excuse my language, the belt to ass celebration that is sweeping America right now. I'm of the generation, I'm of the raise the roof generation. I'm of the, I don't even know what we were doing back in my day, whatever. But this is the new celebration, the BTA belt to ass. And Auburn ran to their fans, grabbed a couple belts, and started doing the celebration. Listen, I know that this made some rounds on some of the Kentucky pages and the Kentucky blogs and this and that. Listen, Kentucky fans, I never tell fans how to feel. I don't think it's a big deal. I think, listen, a celebration of an SEC regular season title or a Big East regular season title or a Big 12 or an Atlantic 10 or Mountain West, doesn't really matter. It's a celebration of a year's worth of work. So I have no problem if you happen to clinch on the road, you happen to go to your fans, which obviously this was the case because the fans were handing them belts, and you happen to, celebrate with your teammates, outside of the realm of the other fans in the stadium. You're not taunting the other team, nothing like that. I really had no problem with it. I thought it was awesome. I think Auburn deserves this moment. Listen, I keep saying this. Everybody wants to try to say, oh, there's no great this, there's no great that, even compared to UConn. Listen, I'm a UConn guy, and I understand that Auburn has work to do. But what I am saying, I'm not saying that Auburn is better than UConn this year or better than Kentucky in 2012 or better than Villanova in 2018, some of the great teams that we've seen in college basketball. What I am saying is they are in the middle of one of the most incredible regular seasons that we have ever seen. So they absolutely deserve to celebrate. I absolutely have no problem with it. And then what was really cool was this, is that as they're flying back to Auburn, they fly back to Auburn. The game is a 1 p.m. Eastern time game. The 4 p.m. Eastern game is Tennessee, Alabama, which we will get into in a minute. But I only bring it up because they flew back. They were already in Auburn. They were taking a bus back to campus. And that was when they were watching the Alabama-Tennessee game. Remember, if Tennessee won that game, it meant that Auburn was the outright SEC champion. If Tennessee had lost to Alabama, Alabama in theory still could have clinched a share of the regular season title. Well, I bring it up. Great job by the Auburn social media crew. Got to assume they're not going to have a problem with us running this video again for the podcast audience. I apologize, but it's great video. But Auburn needed a Tennessee win to clinch the outright regular season SEC title. You probably know by now how it happened, but dramatic fashion. We'll get to Jemai Mashak's buzzer beater in a second. But here is the Auburn basketball team seeing in real time that they were the SEC champs. Dylan Cardwell singing Rocky Top, just absolutely unbelievable. Really quickly, I do want to talk about the other side of the Kentucky Auburn game here. And I'll probably, by the way, producer Matt, I'll probably just take a break after this quick segment, and then we'll get to some Tennessee, Alabama. But Kentucky, Auburn, okay? So we talked about the Auburn side of things. By the way, I see the chat. Oh, my God, nobody taunted anybody. They're having a good time. They're celebrating, whatever. I do want to talk about it from the Kentucky side of things, though. Because listen, I don't think this loss is some big blemish. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's the biggest deal in the history of college basketball, but it was a disappointing loss in the manner that it happened. And then I think transparently, I'll just say this. I think it was disappointing because after the game, we found out that Kentucky's second leading scorer, Jackson Robinson, is out for the season, okay? And so it's interesting because, first of all, I did a live reaction to that when it happened on Saturday afternoon. You can check that out on the YouTube channel. But really, what I would just say about that is, and just to reiterate really quickly, one, I feel terrible for the kid. Remember, this was a kid that followed Mark Pope from BYU to Kentucky, a kid that kind of bounced around a little bit, was at Texas A&M to start his career, goes to Arkansas, it doesn't work out, goes to BYU, finally finds a home with Mark Pope, follows Mark Pope, withdrew from the draft, probably would have been a second-round pick last year. And so I just feel terrible for the kid. I know how excited he was to be a Wildcat. I know how well he was playing in certain moments. But I also know how frustrating it is for him that he just doesn't get to end his 1 year at Kentucky the way he had hoped. Listen, everybody thought, that is this going to end with a deep tournament run? What does it mean for him? Well, we find out that the season's over. I'll say this too really quick. I actually feel bad for Kentucky fans. Obviously, we do this on a day in, day out basis. We talk a lot of college hoops. And I just go back to late May, early June at the NBA draft deadline. I remember how excited Kentucky fans were for the possibility of Jackson Robinson. I remember staying up that night of the NBA draft deadline. I said it in the reaction. I actually was flying to Mexico the next day for vacation. I remember landing in Mexico to seeing the news that Jackson Robinson had officially withdrawn from the draft and committed to Kentucky. So I feel bad for the fans. I feel bad for the player. And I talked a little bit about what this means big picture for Kentucky. What I will say, after having 24 hours to really think about this, I think where I land on Kentucky, it's not so much what does this mean for the season. It's going to be an uphill battle. We know that. Lamont Butler doesn't look like he's 100%. Andrew Carr has been dealing with the back injuries. You're being forced to play a lot of young players. But let me say this. I think I have come to this place on this Kentucky season, which still has a couple weeks left. I think that regardless of what happens going forward, regardless of what happens from today's March 2nd on, this Kentucky basketball season, in my opinion, should be considered a success. And I think Kentucky fans should feel really good about having Mark Pope as their head coach. Okay. And listen, I know this sounds like a funeral. I know it sounds like the season is over. It's not over. And I still believe that if you can get Lamont Butler healthy, you can still make a run. I still believe you're an elite team. But I also believe that Mark Pope has been dealt about as tough of a hand as anybody really in college basketball this year. Really, I go back and it's like, you go back to basically Christmas. They have not really had a 100% fully healthy roster since before Christmas. Remember, Kirk Kriisa goes down in the Gonzaga game the first week of December. You're just starting to figure out that injury. Then Andrew Carr has his back issue. Then Lamont Butler has his shoulder issue. He misses a few games. Then he comes back. Andrew Carr comes back. Then Lamont Butler hurts the shoulder again and misses time. And I go back to the conversation we had before the Texas game where it was just like, look, man, you just got to get everybody healthy for March, okay? Well, March is here. Lamont Butler is back. He's not 100%, but we hope he'll get there. But to then lose Jackson Robinson after bringing him back, it's just as catastrophic as you can get. I just feel bad for Mark Pope because every single day you're going to the well trying to figure out new things. And it's like early in the season, it would be like, well, what about this rotation? What about that rotation? Is he play? It's like now it's just like he's just trying to figure anything out to keep this team's head above water. And so to me, when I look at this season, whatever happens from here, I think it's considered a success because in my opinion, at full strength in one off season with basically zero time. Remember, Mark Pope didn't get the job till April 10th, 11th, 12th, somewhere in that range. He put together a top 10 team that could compete with anybody in college basketball. You go back to what this team was before all of these injuries. You beat Duke first week of the season, second week of the season, third, fourth game into the year. You beat Gonzaga in Seattle. I know that win doesn't look great now. That was an incredible win, an incredible comeback, especially in a game where you lose a key player in Kirk Kriisa. You beat Florida. Florida is trending towards a number one seed, okay? So I can't sit here and again, I don't want to be too negative and too like this is like a funeral, but I also want to appreciate what Mark Pope has done because he's the Kentucky coach. When you lose at home to a team like Auburn, people are going to sit there and question this and question that. It's like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. Auburn is a team full of 24, 25-year-old grown men who have largely all played together for 2, 3, 4 years. They're the number one team in the country by far. And so it's not about the Auburn loss, and it's not even about what happens going forward, because I just don't think there's very much you can do when you're dealing with this many injuries. Now, again, if you're looking for a little bit of a silver lining, we talked about it on Saturday afternoon. I did a quick reaction. One, at least now you know. At least there's no, we'll bring him back in a week and we'll have him practice and maybe he'll be ready then and maybe he'll be ready for the NCAA tournament. No, it's time for other guys to step up. It's for time for other guys to know that their opportunity is here for them. And I think that's all you can ask as a player, is knowing that your opportunity is there. Now you got to go take advantage of it. I still think this team can make a run. I still think with the right bracket and the right breaks, they can be okay. But man, oh man, it's just so disappointing. All right. Should we take the quick break? I really don't have a ton on Tennessee, Alabama. You know what, producer Matt, let's just roll through Tennessee, Alabama right now, because I was going to take a break, but I'll be honest, I only have about 3-4 minutes on this game. First of all, I'll say this, is that, the Auburn-Kentucky game, I think there was a lot of excitement. Auburn, huge road test Saturday afternoon at Rupp Arena. Didn't really live up to the hype unless you're an Auburn fan, and then it exceeded it. Tennessee, Alabama, to me, lived up to the hype. Top 5 matchup, both teams, or maybe top 6 matchup, whatever it was. I don't even, who cares about the polls at this point? Top 6 matchup, unbelievable game. Really just an awesome back and forth game. I think at one point I really was thinking to myself, this might be the game of the year in college basketball. I know there's been other good ones. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Kentucky, Florida was awesome. Kentucky, Alabama, that first Alabama game was awesome. Some of the Auburn games early in the year were awesome. I can't think of one that was better than this. Back and forth. Yes, it was ugly early. Yes, it was a ref show early, but late, it was just two great teams making great plays, at least until the final minute when Alabama completely fell apart. I mean, this is kind of incredible. Alabama was up 76-72 with 36 seconds to go. And we're not going to get into everything, but there were some missed free throws. There was a Chaz Lanier and one. There was Alabama's inability to get the ball in against the Tennessee defense. Well, I bring it up because it ended up being tied basically with about 2, 3, 4 seconds left. When Tennessee gets the ball back, they give it to Jemai Mashak, and then this happened.
Gotta go. He will fire.
March, people. March is here. Jemai Mashak with the buzzer beater. Unbelievable finish. Unbelievable game. By the way, I did not send it to producer Matt. Jemai Mashak had an all-time rant, if you want to call it a rant, I don't know what you want to call it, after the game, where he just was like, this is who we are. This is what we do. We were never going to lose, Vol for life. It was an unbelievable moment for college hoops. And when you look at the bigger picture, listen, I'm not going to do the Torres overreact. Oh my goodness, it means so much for Tennessee and Alabama. No, these were two elite teams. There's basically at this point, let's call a spade, 6 teams vying for 4 number 1 seeds. These are 2 of them. So by definition, they're 2 of the top 6 teams in college basketball. If you're 2 of the top 6 teams in college basketball, it means your teams that are good enough to get a number 1 seed, go to a Final Four, and in theory, hypothetically, win a national championship. So I'm not going to sit here and say, because Alabama had a 4-point lead in Knoxville and couldn't close out, that there's some terrible team. I'm not going to say because Tennessee had a buzzer beater that they've gone to this other level that's, nobody can beat them. What I think is they're 2 of the best teams in what is an awesome year in the SEC and an awesome year in college basketball. What I will say, the only real big picture ramifications that I do think came out of this game, number 1 seed, I think Alabama now has a little bit of an uphill battle for a number 1 seed because the bottom line is, I think basically since the first bracketology that would have come out in, May and June of last year when the rosters got put together, I think everybody thought Alabama was a number 1, number 2, number 3 in the country type team and a team trending to get a number 1 seed. And I know there was a couple weeks in, November when they lost a few games and people were a little bit worried about them. But it feels like they've been trending to a number 1 seed basically for all of the entire season. Well, after this loss, what it feels like to me is pretty straightforward, is that right now, barring something shocking, 3 of the number 1 seeds are basically set in stone. Auburn, I think, could lose out. I don't think they're going to, but I think they could lose out. I think they would still end up with a number 1 seed. What are they sitting at? 27-2 right now. So you'd be talking about a 27-5 team that won the SEC regular season title. They're going to get one. Duke plays Wake in North Carolina. In theory, if they lost those games, maybe they don't get one. I don't think that they will. So basically, I think Auburn, Duke, and Houston are going to end up with number one seeds. Coming into the weekend, I would have given that fourth one to Alabama. But now, as Florida bounces back with a nice win over Texas A&M, which we're not going to talk about, with this loss for Alabama, I think they're actually in position to potentially not get the number one seed, that fourth number one seed. You look at their schedule, by the way. The good news is you still have a couple huge games. Bad news is you got a couple huge games, and if you go 1-1, I don't know if it's enough. They play Florida later in the week. Then they close the season at Auburn on Senior Day in what I would expect to be about the most hostile and emotional environment in college basketball. So to me, this loss, all it really says, I think Alabama now has a little bit of an uphill battle to get a number one seed. Tennessee, I think, to a degree, does as well. I would give that fourth spot to Florida. But listen, it's going to be one of those three teams that get that final spot. If you're Alabama, the positive is you still got a couple big moments and a big opportunities to get big wins. Florida at home, Auburn on the road to close the regular season. Tennessee, not so much. Tennessee, I know they close with South Carolina. I don't even remember who they play in the middle of the week, but it's nobody very good. And so I just bring that up to very simply say that, Tennessee's probably in all right position at Ole Miss and South Carolina. So, you go 2-0, you win a couple games in the SEC tournament, you're probably in position for that fourth number one seed. I would give it to Florida right now, but it doesn't change the fact that this was kind of, from an Alabama side of things, a little bit of a disappointing loss. You're out of the SEC regular season title picture. You're also now, I think, on the outside looking in of the fourth number one seed. The other big picture ramification is it does feel like we're starting to figure out that top four at the SEC tournament, which would get would it be a triple bye, double bye into the quarters on Friday. Auburn has locked up a spot. Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee, they've been the four best teams all year, especially as Kentucky has been more banged up. It looks like they will be in position. Alabama can't go 0-2, though, because Missouri's right there. Missouri's right there for Tennessee as well. But those four are probably going to get the four double byes in the SEC tournament. And then from there, I think beyond that, what becomes interesting is the fact that, you could be in position to hypothetically, get a number one seed, but you got to win there. All right, I've talked long enough. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we do, hit on some Big 12 notes. There's two Big 12 teams that all of a sudden are like, oh, my goodness, those teams are good. Talk about them. We'll talk about that really bad Arkansas loss. What does it mean? Then we'll do some bubble stuff. Quick break. Be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, long day of podcasting. Sometimes don't always look the best. So look at this. This is a little bit not great, okay? Well, here is the great news. The great people at Firebox said, Torres, you're a professional. You just got 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. You need to look better. And so they sent me a couple awesome things. I want to pull them out for you right now. This is all from the winter collection, by the way. Spring collection is coming out. We got the vest, very, very, very nice. The sweater, very professional for when I go to professional events. We got these nice blue jeans. I think the question now everybody's asking is, Torres, how do you actually look when you put that stuff on? Let's find out. Well, what do you think? Sweater fits perfectly. Great for all occasions. When I go to games, when I go out to a dinner, warm weather, cool weather, it's perfect. Speaking of perfect, these jeans are phenomenal. Great for games, great for social events. Oh, by the way, a little bit stretchy if those New Year's resolutions aren't going on as planned. Really quickly, we got to try out. Let's try out the vest. It fits perfectly. Not a surprise. So here's the deal. If you want to look as good as Torres, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go to Fioboc.com. That's F-I-O-B-O-C. Fioboc.com. And here's the best part. For listeners to the Aaron Torres pod, you get 20% off with code Torres20 at checkout. We also put a referral link in all of our YouTube videos. Thank you to Fioboc. By the way, make sure you're following them on social media at F-I-O-B-O-C. Thank you to Fioboc. You want to look as good as Torres, check them out. Again, promo code Torres.
All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. By the way, chat, why are you guys so quiet? We got a nice little crowd in the chat, live right now on YouTube. Nobody wants to say anything. Nobody's got takes from the weekend. Drop your thoughts, drop your opinions. We're going to keep the conversation going here on what was an awesome Saturday and Sunday final weekend, second to last weekend of the college basketball regular season. And I do want to switch gears over to the Big 12. By the way, we're going to talk Texas Tech and Kansas. I am not wearing Texas Tech gear, although guns up, because Texas Tech takes care of business against Kansas in this game. They win by a couple in a game that, frankly, was a wild game back and forth. But really, the big picture to me is that I just don't think people are talking enough about Texas Tech. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So Texas Tech, kind of to me, even before Saturday's game, kind of one of the teams that I don't think people are talking about nearly enough. Came into the week ranked in the top 10, came into the week third in the Big 12 standings behind Houston and Texas. What's worth noting about that is the fact that Texas Tech earlier this year won at Houston, the only team to win at Houston this season. Also beat Arizona at home. So they were in third place, top 10 in the country, had beaten the two teams in front of them. By the way, Houston came to Texas Tech on Monday. Texas Tech was down two key players, and they still kind of battled with Houston. So they've been playing well, but, listen, you're looking for one more signature moment now. You kind of took a weird loss to TCU a few games ago. So can you get the win? The big question is, can you get the win? Well, you absolutely do, going into Fog Allen and getting the 78-73 win in what is only the second time in school history that Texas Tech has won. What stood out to me about this game, first of all, first half, Texas Tech was in complete control, up 48-37 at the half. They're bombing away from three. And it was funny because I put out a very nice tweet about Texas Tech. And of course, they're running Kansas off the floor. This is what it means. And then what ends up happening, of course, we already know, is that from there, Texas Tech, of course, they don't make as many threes. Kansas makes a run, and Kansas is in position to potentially steal a game at home. But Texas Tech holds on 78-73. And so after a result like this, listen, I think it'd be easy to kind of default to the Kansas conversation. By the way, the Kansas conversation got especially weird. Zeke Mayo, one of their star players, unfortunately put out a tweet kind of sharing some very negative, messages that have been sent to him. We all know that's not appropriate. We all know that frankly, it's just gross behavior. But I bring it up because after that happened with Zeke Mayo, Bill Self then put out a statement basically saying, hey, we're trying hard, support our team. So I just bring it up. Kansas isn't playing well. They've had a few just really bad moments over the course of the season. Lost at Utah, got destroyed by BYU. And so when Kansas loses a game like this at home, the immediate default is, well, Kansas stinks. Well, Kansas is this. Well, Kansas is that. What does it mean? Here's my thing. Can we just take a moment and give credit to Texas Tech? First of all, this is a team that now, like I said, they've won at Houston. Only team in America that's done that. They've won at Kansas, a place that not a lot of teams win, no matter what you think of Kansas, no matter how disappointing that they've been. They haven't lost all year at Fog Allen Fieldhouse, except for to Houston in that wild game where they were basically in complete control until the very end, okay? So I just bring it up because Texas Tech has won at Houston. They've now won at Kansas. And if you watch this team, this is one of those teams, I hate to do like the whole they're Final Four this, they can do that. It's like I need to see a bracket before I declare this team's this and that team's that. But Texas Tech is absolutely a team that, when we start talking about teams that very easily could be in San Antonio for the Final Four, we're going to talk about the Auburns and the Dukes and the Floridas and whatever. Texas Tech is in that group, man, because Texas Tech, to me, they got a little bit of everything. Veteran point guard Elijah Hawkins, sixth-year guy, played at multiple schools, just kind of gets it. JT Toppin, to me, listen, I haven't sat down and really thought about it. I think you could argue JT Toppin is the best transfer in all of college basketball. I think he's a guy that will probably win the Big 12 Player of the Year award. He's averaging 17 and 10. He's hitting about 33% from three, and he had 21 points in this game. Then the thing that stands out, and producer Matt has it at the bottom of the screen, just the three-point shooting. And I think when you start to look at what's wrong with Kansas and why are they as bad as they've been, 19 and 10 after this game, a lot of Kansas fans and a lot of Texas Tech fans pointed this out. Texas Tech is that new age team that spaces the floor, shoots a lot of threes, and makes a ton of them. And Kansas, on the other hand, is a team that went 4 of 18 from three, and on the season is just not shooting the ball well. Now, part of it isn't really Bill Self's fault. He brought in Rylan Griffin. He brought in Zeke Mayo. You would think that those guys would maybe be shooting a little bit better than they have. But the point I'm trying to make, Texas Tech just looked like the better coach, better fundamentals, better this, better that. And I think the thing that stands out about Texas Tech, they have a million guys that can beat you. Christian Anderson, the freshman, Chance McMillan, the transfer from Grand Canyon. And I think beyond that, what else also stands out is how strategic that they've been in the portal. Part of the thing that we keep talking about with Kansas is they went for all these big names in the portal. And it's like, yeah, but are these big names actually going to result in wins? Well, guess what? Texas Tech, some of the guys that they went after maybe aren't as high profile. JT Toppin, I always thought he was phenomenal at New Mexico. I don't know how many people, I guess you would say he was one of the higher profile guys in the transfer portal, but some of the other guys that they got just were not the guys that everybody would have immediately defaulted to as the players that you had to have. The pieces fit, they shoot a ton of threes, and they are playing really, really good basketball right now. Again, I don't want to, it's a weird thing with Texas Tech. I don't want to overstate it, but I don't want to understate it as well. Because I feel like I'm sitting here saying they're one of the teams that everybody should be looking out for. They're underrated at number 10. I think a lot of Texas Tech fans be like, dude, we've been awesome all season long. Where you been, Torres? Now, I've been here. We just haven't necessarily talked about them on this show. But I also just believe that I just think they could beat anybody. They have size. They have athleticism. They shoot the three ball well. They shoot foul shots well. They have a veteran point guard. That is just a team that, in my opinion, can do a ton of damage. They did a ton of damage in Fall Gallon Fieldhouse with that 78-73 win. Congrats to Texas Tech. Like I said, one of 2 wins in school history at Fall Gallon Fieldhouse. With Kansas, this is just who they are. This isn't surprising to me. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I picked it and was adamant about it. I just don't think Kansas is very good once again. And I just think that's kind of who they are at this point. Let's stay in the Big 12 because I'll tell you what, Texas Tech, we have not talked about nearly enough as far as teams that can do damage come March. There is a team that we have talked about quite a bit over the last couple of weeks that is worth acknowledging here, that is absolutely worth discussing here, and that they just keep finding new and fun and dominant ways to win. I am, of course, talking about the BYU Cougars, who were at home on Saturday night after a long week. Not really. It's like a 6-day road trip, though, to Arizona. They sweep the Arizona schools. They get the win over West Virginia, a team currently projected to be in the NCAA tournament, 77-56, okay? And so when I look at this game, what stands out to me is a couple things. I think, first of all, listen, BYU has had an incredible 2 weeks or so, right? You destroy Kansas at home. We were there for that game. It was unbelievable. Then you go on the road. You win the thriller against Arizona. But you sit there and say, it was great, but, there was a little bit of a questionable foul call, whatever. But I bring it up because I think the last 2 games have told me as much about BYU as anything, as crazy as it sounds. One, you just took care of business against Arizona State on Wednesday. And that sounds like that's the dumbest thing Torres has ever said. Why are you getting credit for beating a terrible Arizona State team? It's because you're coming off 2 big wins, Kansas at home, Arizona on the road. And then guess what? You play Arizona Saturday night. You don't play Arizona State again until Wednesday. And so listen, it's easy to sit there and say that's a win you should have. But when you're coming off 2 big wins, then you got to sit in a hotel room for 72 hours and do nothing. It's hard to keep that focus, and BYU gets that win over Arizona State. Well, I bring it up because then you got to go home to West Virginia. And West Virginia is a team that you had success against earlier in the year. Again, you're on this winning streak of 5 games, and everybody's patting you on the back. You're back at home, first time since Kansas. Everybody's telling you how awesome it is. And, it just feels like a game that would have been easy for me to look ahead to, especially when you have Iowa State on the road after this. So it would have been easy to sit there and say, we already beat West Virginia. We're going to take care of them. It's like, no, that's not what they did. They find a way to win, even though I will admit that first half was ugly, okay? Wasn't quite Arkansas ugly, and we're going to get to Arkansas in a minute, don't you worry. A little bit of a low-scoring first half for the BYU Cougars, 25-19 at halftime. And then in the second half, they just do what they've done, just absolutely blitzing the West Virginia Mountaineers. This was a game where West Virginia in this game, was struggling, whatever. But credit to BYU. What stands out to me about this game is really 2 things. One, new guys stepping up for BYU. What is the sign of a solid team, of not just a star player, not just a this, not just a that? It's when other guys can step up that you don't expect. We know how good Yegor Demon is for this team. Richie Saunders is playing at an all Big 12 first team level, 0 doubt in my mind. But neither of them, they both played fine on Saturday. I wouldn't say that they played their best games by any stretch. Well, who steps up? Fus Traore, a veteran guy, played for Mark Pope. He's kind of seen his role with this team kind of come and go as the season has gone on. 20 points and 10 boards off the bench for that kid who is, again, just stuck with the program kind of as there's been this transition from coaching staff to coaching staff, stuck with the team, stuck with the program, and now he's having success. So he gets the big win. I think the other thing that stands out, BYU is a team that has dominated on offense. Defensively, they were phenomenal on Saturday night. Hold West Virginia to 33% from the field, 30% from behind the three-point arc. They do a great job on the boards, plus 11 on the boards, and they showed you a different manner that they can win. What's especially impressive is that defensive effort comes as, this is crazy. I don't think people realize this. BYU was in the middle of one of the most insane offensive streaks that we have seen in college basketball over the last 2 weeks. Okay. So I saw this stat just minutes before we went on air, but this is a crazy stat from, let me see if I can find this. I'm trying to figure out who sent out this tweet. It was, let me see if I can find it real quick. It was from Opta Stats, OPTA. This is crazy. In the previous 3 games for BYU, they scored 90 plus points, shot 50% from the field, made a dozen threes with fewer than a dozen turnovers in all 3 of those wins. So that was the Kansas, Arizona State game. How about this? No other Division I team had done that for 3 games in a row this century. So in other words, there had been no team since at least 2000 that had put up those stats that I just gave you, scoring 90 plus points with a dozen plus 3-pointers, 50% shooting from the field, and 12 or fewer turnovers. And so the fact that you can do it on the defensive end is a great sign. But here is the big thing to me that I think stands out more than anything, is that if you are putting together that kind of offensive production, the defense was great, okay? How many teams are going to be able to beat you come tournament time? Now, listen, I'm not going to do the thing where, BYU, they're going to the final. I'm not doing that. Auburn's really good. Duke's really good. Florida's really good. There aren't very many teams that are playing better than BYU right now. 90 plus points coming into Saturday, 90 plus points, 12 3-pointers, 50% from the field, 12 under 12 turnovers. That's pretty freaking good. And so with BYU, I just sit there and say, imagine being, one of those teams, right? Imagine being Michigan State. Imagine being Wisconsin, because by the way, I think at this point it's safe to say BYU's not on the bubble anymore. We don't need to worry about that. They're playing for seeding every single game. They get better and better, and they improve that seeding. The West Virginia win will help. I don't know that it's like an earth-shattering, game-changing result, but they were kind of on that 8-9 line coming into the weekend. I think they'll probably be on the 7 line the next time that Joe Lunardi or whoever puts out his next bracket. And so what becomes interesting is you start looking at some of the teams they could match up with. You could see that they're the team, and I know it's cliche, you just do not want to see in your bracket come NCAA tournament time. Again, look at what they have done. Look at who they are. Look at who they have done it against. And it's just like, imagine me again, Michigan State. They're rolling in the Big Ten. Do you want to play a team that could put up 90 points if you don't show up ready to play? Michigan State doesn't shoot the 3-ball well, where they could end up, making 15 threes and you make 3. It's a tough way to get by against a 7 seed. Wisconsin, really good team, loses to Michigan State on Sunday. But again, is that the kind of team that you want to see? Even like a Tennessee, listen, Vols are awesome, but Vols are kind of hit or miss offensively. Now they're great defensively. They're a great rebounding team, but BYU, goes 8 of 11 from 3 in the first half. You might be down 10 and might not be able to make it up. So I could go on and on. BYU is playing unbelievable. They've now won 10 of 12. I just don't think people realize how good this team is playing. They'll be in the top 20 come Monday after this another win, again, 6 straight wins, 10 of 12. And here's the fun part. They now get to go to Iowa State on Tuesday or Wednesday this week. I think it's Tuesday, but I'm not even positive. I just bring it up because that is another chance to make a national statement. Now, if you lose at Iowa State, there's no shame in that. Ask Arizona fans. Arizona fans should not be frustrated losing at Iowa State. And I don't think BYU fans should be frustrated if you lose at Arizona State yourselves this weekend. But the counter to that is that I also think if you get that win, oh my goodness, it's scary season. Good news is for BYU, win or lose, I think they're kind of locked into like that 5 seed at the Big 12 tournament. Right now they have 6 losses in league play. Kansas has 8, so they would basically have to lose 2 straight, could get as high as the number 4 seed, depending on what happens with Iowa State. So you give BYU a ton of credit. They're playing really good basketball. And again, I know it's cliche. We do it this time of year. You talk about a team that nobody wants to see. BYU is definitely one of them. Tell you what, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. Producer Matt, what we'll do is we'll talk Arkansas on the other end. And that'll be a nice little way to lead into bubble talk, because Arkansas, I really thought if they beat South Carolina if they beat South Carolina on Saturday, they're probably headed to the tournament. It's easy, smooth sailing. Well, the waters got choppy, my friends, because Arkansas got destroyed. We're going to discuss that next. Talk bubble talk. Quick break. Be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, long day of podcasting, sometimes don't always look the best. So look at this. This is a little bit not great, okay? Well, here is the great news. The great people at Firebox said, Torres, you're a professional. You just got 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. You need to look better. And so they sent me a couple awesome things. I want to pull them out for you right now. This is all from the winter collection, by the way. Spring collection is coming out. We got the vest, very, very, very nice. The sweater, very professional for when I go to professional events. We got these nice blue jeans. I think the question now everybody's asking is, Torres, how do you actually look when you put that stuff on? Let's find out. Well, what do you think? Sweater fits perfectly. Great for all occasions. When I go to games, when I go out to a dinner, warm weather, cool weather, it's perfect. Speaking of perfect, these jeans are phenomenal. Great for games, great for social events. Oh, by the way, a little bit stretchy if those New Year's resolutions aren't going on as planned. Really quickly, we got to try out. Let's try out the vest. It fits perfectly, not a surprise. So here's the deal. If you want to look as good as Torres, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go to Fioboc.com. That's F-I-O-B-O-C. Fioboc.com. And here's the best part. For listeners to the Aaron Torres pod, you get 20% off with code Torres20 at checkout. We also put a referral link in all of our YouTube videos. Thank you to Fioboc. By the way, make sure you're following them on social media at F-I-O-B-O-C. Thank you to Fioboc. You want to look as good as Torres, check them out. Again, promo code Torres.
All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. We'll get to some of your comments in the chat here in a little bit. It is Sunday night going into Monday, and we got a lot of college hoops to discuss. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. There's one more kind of big picture conversation I want to have before we get to just some small picture bubble stuff. But there is no team right now that is more bubbly than the Arkansas Razorbacks. The sad thing, though, it kind of felt like that they had sort of kind of almost basically played themselves off the bubble. Now, that's not really the case. But remember, they had that really tough 4-game stretch that included at A&M, at Auburn, and Alabama, LSU at home as well. They went 1-3 in that stretch. That's not surprising. And he kind of sat there and said, okay, now it's kind of win time. Final 5 games of the season were somewhat manageable. You had Missouri at home, Texas at home, then South Carolina on the road, then at Vandy on the road, then Mississippi State at home. So to their credit, get those 2 wins against Missouri and Texas. And at that point, you literally felt like, okay, just don't screw up at South Carolina. It'll be a quad 2 loss. If you can just get that game, you're gonna be okay. And I think they basically would have unofficially clinched the tournament. Going into the South Carolina game on Saturday, Lenardi had them as like the next 4 in, so they were officially sort of off the bubble. It's all you need to do. I don't care if you beat South Carolina by 1. I don't care if you beat South Carolina by 100. They're the worst team in the SEC. You gotta figure out a way to get the win instead. Not only did Arkansas not get the win, how about this? It was statistically maybe the worst half of basketball and arguably the worst game that they have played in decades as they lose to South Carolina 72-53. But that's not really the story. Arkansas with 14 first half points. 14 first half points. I saw some stats that it is the fewest first half points they have had or points in any single half they've had in like since 1987, 88, something like that, which means, remember, they didn't join the SEC until the early 90s. So it is basically the worst individual half that they have played since they have joined the SEC, which was well over 30 years ago. Now, second half, they put up a lot of points, but they can't get any stops. They finished the game with just an ungodly, just awful 15 of 52 shooting from the field. That's 28%, 3 of 22 from 3, 13%. At least they shot free throws pretty well, but it all really didn't matter when you're that bad from the field and that bad from 3. And so after the game, listen, I'm not going to lie, a little bit dark on the Arkansas social media streets. But it was interesting because I did listen to John Calipari. Like, he basically admitted, like, 3-4 minute mark, I said, don't foul. Let's just get out of here and move on. But I bring it up because he said something in the postgame that I did think was worth noting for us and worth discussing, because I think it's easy in a moment like this to think that the sky is falling, that the season is over. And I think it's actually not really the case. So, producer Matt, go ahead and play the sound of John Calipari after the game. I thought he said some interesting things.
When you go 0 for 17, shouldn't win a game. Someone got to make a shot. You were 0 for 17, you're not going to be in a good game. I told them 8 games like we played, you were due for a dud. It was a dud. Move on. I said, now, what they did to us, they exploited us near the basket, which my guess is every team will try to do now. So we got to figure that out. But I said, burn.
That was John Calipari after the game. First of all, love the Arkansas communication staff. They do a great job. Appreciate them. Don't know what was going on with that video. That was straight from the Arkansas media team. But let me say this, is because I think people saw the burn the tape quote, and I think a lot of people were frustrated. Cal doesn't care. He's not concerned enough. I actually think it's the exact right approach he should take. And I actually thought some of those comments were very, very, very interesting and relevant and kind of important as to the mindset of that team as they have to get right now going into these final 2 games of the regular season. First off, listen, again, I know that it sounds like excuses, right? I know it sounds like John Calipari doesn't care. Oh my goodness, burn the tape. We're going to move on. We didn't foul. He didn't say it in that clip, but he did say, look, 3-4 minute mark. I said, I want to be back in the locker room in 10, 15 minutes. We don't need to foul. We don't need to extend this. This isn't our day. Let's move on. But at the same time, what I will say, and I know I'll get criticized for this. I know people say, oh, Torres, you're defending Cal like you always do. One, I didn't hate the burn the tape segment comments, because here's the crazy part is, like, what are you going to do? Yell and scream because the team was terrible? No, I think you have to burn the tape. I think you have to move on. I'll say this too. The only comment that I actually disagree with in that rant was he said, look, we only have 7 healthy players right now, and 3 of them did not play well. I'm going to actually disagree with Cal on that. I watched that game as much as I could without getting sick to my stomach. I don't think a single guy played well. Carter Knox led the team with 11 points, but that was only because he was 6 for 6 from the foul line. When you shoot 28% from the field and 13% from 3, I'm sorry, I don't know that you could sit there and say that, oh, by the way, 4 of our 7 played well. They really actually didn't. But I will also say this about what Cal said. I know this sounds like an excuse, but I do think this team was kind of due for a dud. And now the question becomes, how do you bounce back from this? Again, sit there. Oh, Torres, you're defending Cal. Well, here's the truth. And he said this. Since February 1st, so obviously Saturday was March 1st. February 1st was the day they went to Kentucky. They played 8 super high leverage games from February 1st on, and they went 5-3 in those games. And again, 5-3 doesn't sound great, but when you think about the fact that 3 losses, 2 of them were to top 10 teams on the road. Texas A&M was top 10 at the time. Auburn was number 1 in the country at the time. You lose to Alabama on the road at home. It doesn't seem like 5-3 is good. The only losses were to top 10 teams, 2 of them on the road. And so, yes, they have played 8 straight super high leverage games. And so I'm not making an excuse. But what I am saying is you could see the scenario where they get through not only the Alabamas and the Auburns and the whatevers, but then They beat Missouri, they beat Texas, and they just sit there and say, well, we're going to take care of South Carolina. That's no problem. They're last place in the SEC. I'm not making an excuse. I'm just saying you can understand. We're all competitors. We've all played sports. We've all had that moment where we just took somebody lightly. I'm not saying Arkansas should have. I'm not saying anyone should have, but everybody does it. Auburn didn't show up against Florida and got the doors blown off them. Florida didn't show up against Georgia earlier this week, and they got the doors blown off. And so with Arkansas, again, I do think that, listen, they were kind of due for a dud. I do kind of agree with Coach Cal. Now, the big thing is, how do you bounce back from this? Because now your back is against the wall. You do have to get some wins. They play Vandy on Tuesday night. Vandy, it sounds crazy. Outside of Auburn, is Vandy playing as well as anybody in the SEC? It sounds absurd. You know that Vandy has won 3 straight games against ranked opponents? 3 straight games, including an overtime win against Missouri. We'll cover Vandy in the bubble portion in just a minute. I think Vandy's officially off the bubble. You win against Ole Miss at home, at Texas A&M, and Missouri at home. You're sitting at 20-9, 8-8 in the SEC. You're in the NCAA tournament. So you have to get right against Vandy. You then have Mississippi State, which kind of has been up and down all year. But it's hard for me to get mad at Cal for those comments because I think there's actually some truth into them. I think there's some truth into the idea of like, you know what? It was ugly. We got to move on. We were due for a bad game. Everybody has a bad game. It's how do we respond from that? So listen, Arkansas season is going to be defined these next 2 games. Do you have to go 2-0? Probably not, because the SEC tournament's going to give you a million opportunities if you can win there. But their backs are pretty much up against the wall. You do basically got to go 2-0. We'll see what happens, but this is a crushing loss for the Razorbacks. But again, it's not a devastating one. By the way, I should even mention this. Joe Lunardi put out an updated, bracket sheet. I don't think he put out a full bracket, but he had Arkansas still in the field, even with a loss to the worst team in the SEC on the road. So it wasn't pretty. It's not devastating, but how do you bounce back from here is how you're going to define Arkansas season. Arkansas on the bubble. We're going to get to the bubble in a minute. Before we do, though, I want to shout out our friends. I want to shout out our partners. I want to shout out Collie Puffs at ColliePuffs.com. You thought we forgot about our friends at Collie Puffs, didn't you? Well, we absolutely did not. It is March. You're going to be on the couch. You're going to be eating a lot. You're going to be snacking a lot. You're going to be watching nothing but basketball now from now till the middle of April. Well, guess what? As March Madness unfolds, you need a snack that is both healthy but also delicious. My friends, you need yourselves some Collie Puffs. Okay, so I've told you about this company, family-owned company, not far from where I live in California. Joey is a football diehard Rams season ticket holder, and he was sitting on the couch one day basically sitting there saying, you know what? I need to go ahead and make a snack that is both healthy but delicious. I need something for me to eat, for my kids to eat. Came up with Collie Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But the best part is these things freaking taste delicious, okay? So many of you have tried them out. I truly appreciate everybody's support of Collie Puffs through the Aaron Torres pod. And here's the crazy part. If you have not tried Collie Puffs yet, well, shame on you because you are missing out. And these are the snacks that you need for your couch binging in March Madness, okay? So for more information on Collie Puffs, this is what I need you to do. Go to ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com, ColliePuffs.com. You can also find them on Amazon.com. Just search Amazon.com. You can find Collie Puffs there. Collie Puffs are the healthy but delicious snack alternative. We really do appreciate your support. Collie Puffs appreciates your support. If you have not checked them out yet, please make sure to do so. All right, we're going to get to the bubble. I need a quick sip of water. We're going on 58 minutes strong here. Give me half a second. All right. Let's go ahead and switch gears. Let's go ahead and do some bubble talk because it is that time of year. We did this on Friday's show. A lot of you seem to really like it. So let's just go ahead and quickly rip through the winners and the losers on the bubble from over the weekend. Because we're a glass is half full podcast, let's start with the winners of the weekend. First one, a team that I think low-key people probably are not fully aware is even on the bubble is actually probably Baylor, okay? So Baylor, preseason top 25 team, top 10 team, and they were a top 10 team because they were in my top 10. I had the same top 10 as the AP, and they took kind of a lot of losses in non-con, but you sat there and said, well, they're going to get right for the Big 12. Then all of a sudden, they weren't playing great in the Big 12. They lost 3 straight. They were in Joe Lunardi's next 4 out, so basically the final 8 teams in the field. They had taken a bad loss to Colorado. They needed to get right. They did so at Oklahoma State. With the win, they're now 17-12. I think the positive for them, they have some really solid wins out of conference. A bubble win over Arkansas, who's also on the bubble. They beat St. John's, a game that is going to continue to look better as time goes on. And then listen, it's almost like the SEC. Essentially, any win you get in the Big 12 is going to be good. This is a team that beat Kansas earlier in the year. This is a team that beat West Virginia, who's a tournament team. They don't have a ton of great wins, but probably enough. Still, you're sitting there at 17-12 overall. You don't want to play with fire too much, 9-9 in the Big 12. I would say go ahead and win one of your final 2. You got to win at TCU over the course of the week. They play there on Tuesday night. TCU is outside the bubble picture as of right now, and that's especially true because you close with Houston at home. So, yeah, I would say beat TCU. You're probably in pretty good shape. You're not going to be punished for losing to Houston on the final day of the regular season. But to their credit, Baylor got a win in a game that they needed. They need to win on Tuesday as well against TCU. Really quickly, let's rip through some of the other ones. Let's go to the SEC. I just mentioned them. Vanderbilt took care of Missouri in overtime. Now their 3rd straight win over a ranked team. Took care of Ole Miss, won at Texas A&M, now beat Missouri. They're 20-9. 8-8 in the SEC. I think they're in the NCAA tournament. I don't even think we need to continue to talk about them as a bubble team. Like everybody else, they're playing for seeding. Credit to Mark Byington. Listen, I saw this as a sentiment from the John Rothsteins and the other people in this business, and I kind of agree with it, is that basically, look, Bruce Pearl's going to win SEC Coach of the Year. If he doesn't, Todd Golden probably deserves it. But man, oh man, what Mark Byington is doing, I believe Vandy was picked to finish 16th in the SEC. The fact that they are now very much in the tournament, let's just go ahead and give Vanderbilt a ton of credit. They do go ahead and close with a couple sort of big ones, right? They play Arkansas at home, and they also play Georgia to close the regular season at Georgia. And so they are not only, I think, in the tournament, I guess in theory, if they lost both those games, maybe they're back on the bubble. They could also knock a few teams out of the tournament picture. By the way, producer Matt, who is he's a little bit of a college hoops diehard right now. He used to just follow Auburn football recruiting this time of year, but now he's a big basketball guy. He just DM'd me privately. He said, I think Vandy is the most underrated team going into the tournament if they get in. I happen to agree. I mean, I think they could get up to that 8-9 line. I mean, again, this is a team that's beaten Tennessee. This is a team that's beaten Kentucky. This is when Kentucky was close to full strength. Beat Missouri, beat Ole Miss. You think they're going to be scared if they're on a neutral court against Duke or somebody like that? So Vandy gets the win. I think they're officially off the bubble. Got a lot of teams here. I'll try to be a little bit quicker. Georgia, got to give credit. I used to call him mediocre Mike White. Now I might have to call him late season run Mike White because Georgia got a 2nd straight big win. Earlier in the week, they beat Florida. They go to Texas, in which was basically a bubble elimination game. They destroyed Texas. Final score 83-67 in this game. Great win for them, and really just a roller coaster of a season. We talked about it on Friday's show. They started 2-1 in SEC play, proceeded to go 2-10 from there, or I guess it would have been 2-9 from there. And you kind of said they're just on the outside looking in. They got no shot. Well, you beat Florida. You win at Texas. Those are 2 quad 1 wins. Georgia has a nice win over St. John's in the out-of-conference. I think right now they're in. Now, the work isn't done. Got to go to that snake pit that is South Carolina. Texas has lost at South Carolina. Arkansas just lost at South Carolina. If Georgia loses at South Carolina, they're probably in the same position as Arkansas. Maybe got to win out. Maybe got to win a game or 2 at the SEC tournament. I mean, South Carolina, we had a vision of 14 SEC teams in. South Carolina might be the team that knocks off a bunch of these teams because Arkansas now takes a bad loss. Texas, we're going to talk about in a minute. But credit Georgia, they got another big win. Know who we need to give credit to? The Indiana Hoosiers very quietly are playing very good basketball, all right? So Mike Effin Woodson, this guy, man, he's forced into retirement, forced to resign. We're calling it a retirement, whatever. Lose the next game to Michigan, they easily could have won. They're now 4-1 in their last 5 games, okay? And so on Saturday, they go to Washington. They have the West Coast road trip. By the way, the Big Ten schedule makers screwed them over. The fact that they're going to the West Coast with 3 games left in early March just feels ridiculous. I think next year, the Big Ten, I think the final 3 games of the season, all those West Coast schools should be playing each other. So UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington, let's get a little round robin going to end the season. But I bring it up because Indiana was playing Washington. Washington's really bad. And really, this was more of a can't lose game than a must win game, if that makes sense. Like, you just can't lose to Washington. So they do get the win. To their credit, they get the victory. Again, 4-1 since they 4-1 in their last 5. I think they're probably in the tournament. They're 18-11 right now. All 11 losses are in quad 1. A couple very nice quad 1 wins, including Purdue at home last week. Got to give Mike Woodson credit where he's due. Now, listen, the other thing too, I don't think either of the final 2 games will crush you if you lose them. Oregon on the road, quad 1 opportunity. Ohio State, another bubble team. I wouldn't recommend going 0-2, but I think you go 1-1, you're in pretty good shape going to the Big Ten tournament. Credit Indiana. They have now won 4 or 5, as I've said a few times. North Carolina, listen, we threw dirt on their grave probably about 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. I'm not going to sit here and pat everybody on the back because North Carolina beat the worst team in the ACC. But with this win, North Carolina takes care of business against Miami, and they have now quietly won 5 straight games. Again, we're not giving them too much credit for beating Florida State, whose coach has resigned. How about this? The last 3 wins for for North Carolina have been against 3 teams whose coaches have either retired midseason or are about to retire at the end of the year. They beat Virginia. They beat one at Florida State. They win at Miami on Saturday. So we're not going to give them credit, but we're not going to give them too much credit. But the bottom line is they had 5 straight games that they couldn't lose. They have won 5 straight. Now it's where it gets interesting. Can't lose to Virginia Tech at home or on the road this week. Virginia Tech is not good. I think that's another coaching job that very well could open this year. You got to get that win. You play Duke on Saturday to close the regular season. Listen, nobody is going to criticize North Carolina for not beating Duke. Obviously, I think if you beat Duke, that's the win that gets you in. You go 1-1. I think you're in pretty good shape going into the ACC tournament. If you go 1-1, that means you finish 20-11 overall. Is that right? Interesting. North Carolina is 19-11 right now, which means they somehow got to play an extra regular season game that I'm not aware of, because you play 31 regular season games. That's 30. So I guess they're playing 32 regular season games in Chapel Hill. I don't know. I just bring it up because they're at 19-11. You finished 20-12. I think you're probably in pretty good shape. You just don't want to take an awful loss at the ACC tournament, but they get the win. Listen, minimal credit to Wake Forest. Wake Forest, we talked about last week. They were the big loser of last week. They lost 3 of 4 to very bad teams. Florida State at home, at NC State. Virginia at home the other day was the crusher. They're now on the fringes of the bubble conversation. They played Notre Dame on the road Notre Dame at home this weekend. It was just a game you couldn't lose. They get the win. We're not going to celebrate them too much. They were in the field and they played themselves out of it. This was a win you had to have. They get it. Good news for them. They play Duke on Monday night, Big Monday. You get that win, we're having a different conversation. I don't think you're going to get it, but if you do, it's a different conversation. Wake Forest gets the win. Xavier, a team that we haven't talked about, Sean Miller's crew, playing really good basketball right now. So they're an interesting story because they got like the tough part of the Big East schedule to start the season. So right now, how about this with Xavier? So right now, we know that St. John's is in first place in the Big East. Creighton is in second place. Marquette is in third place. UConn's in fourth place. Before February 1st, Xavier played UConn twice, St. John's twice, Marquette twice, and Creighton once. So basically, of the 8 toughest games you could have in league play, they had 7 of them by basically like January 25th, okay? I only bring that up to very simply say that to their credit, they got a soft spot in their schedule. They're taking advantage. They've won 5 in a row, 6 of 7. The win against Creighton on Saturday, I think, really puts them in good position. Now, the thing with Xavier, can't take more bad losses. A lot of bad losses in the Big East this year. You have at Butler, Providence to close the regular season. You win those 2. You're 21-10 going into the Big East tournament. The other thing, too, Big East tournament bracket breaks nicely for them. They very likely will get UConn in their first game. You beat UConn in that game, you're in the NCAA tournament. So the road is ahead for Xavier. Xavier, by the way, beat UConn earlier this year in Cincinnati. Madison Square Garden would be a different deal, but Xavier gets a very nice win. And then out of the Mountain West, Boise and San Diego State both on the bubble. I'll be quick here because basically the bottom line is these two teams had a very similar profile. Both of them had road games against bad teams. Boise was playing at Fresno. San Diego State was playing at Wyoming. Neither of them could take a loss. Neither of them does. They both get a win. They both have manageable schedules this last week. The Mountain West trying to get 4 teams in. New Mexico, Utah State are locks. The big question is what's next for BYU and San Diego State. Let's get to some losers. Going to take another quick swig of water here. I'm going on an hour, 10 minutes strong. Let's be quick here. All right, we got some losers. Know who's a loser? We already talked about them. Arkansas Razorbacks. Listen, we just did a deep dive on Arkansas. Cal said after the game, listen, we were due for a dud. They get a dud. Nothing else to say. You have to move on. You have to beat Vanderbilt on Tuesday. By the way, that's a very tough place to play. Missouri just lost there. Kentucky lost there earlier. Tennessee lost there. But you're a team that did win at Kentucky. You're a team that did win at Texas. You're a team that, you've won in big venues before. You have to go to Vanderbilt and get that win. We know about that. We know about Arkansas. We'll see what happens Tuesday night against Vandy. Texas. Texas is a big old loser, okay? Just like Georgia dominated them during the football season, Georgia dominated them at home. We talked about things from the Georgia side of things. Texas is in a free fall right now. Texas now has lost with this loss, I believe, let me double check here. I believe it's 4 straight overall and 6 of 7. Yeah, that's right. 6 of 7 overall. Only win, ironically, was Kentucky at home in a game that you were basically losing the entire game. And, I don't know what else there is to say. It's bad. They're 16-13 right now. Listen, I think there's a scenario where they can still make the NCAA tournament, but probably of all those SEC teams, they have the most work to do. Bad news for them. It doesn't get any easier at Mississippi State on Tuesday night. That is a tough place to play. Then they close with Oklahoma. Feels like the Oklahoma-Texas game is a pseudo bubble burst type game. The loser of that game, I just don't see the scenario where they get in, which brings us to Oklahoma. Oklahoma last Saturday gets the win over Mississippi State at home. You wonder, can they build some momentum? Well, they were in control late against Kentucky. Otega Owe makes that shot. You lose that game. Same deal on Saturday. They're at Ole Miss, have a chance, can't find a way to win. They have now lost their last 2 games by a combined 4 points. And I think they're on the outside looking in. 17-12 overall. We talked about them. They have some great out-of-conference wins. This is a team that beat Arizona and Louisville in Atlantis. Now, Arizona wasn't playing well. Louisville had an injury. Doesn't change. Those wins still count the same. They beat Michigan on a neutral court. So they have good wins, but they're 4-12 in the SEC right now. I don't think the committee can look at a team that went 5-13, even in the toughest league in college basketball history, and say they should be in. I think 6-12 is probably the cutoff. Georgia and Arkansas both have 6 wins. I think Oklahoma's got to go 2-0. I can't see a scenario where a team that went 5-13 in their league is worthy of an NCAA tournament bid. So they close this final week. Missouri at home. Missouri's struggling a little bit too. And then at Texas. And I just think it's a bad spot. I think Oklahoma's on the outside looking in. I know as of last Saturday, I think 14 teams for the SEC was really kind of in play. Well, listen, Texas has played their way out. I think Oklahoma is on the fringes. We've talked about Arkansas. I don't see the scenario where we're getting 14. I think it's probably closer to 11. I think we get 12. The question is that 12-team Oklahoma, maybe Texas, maybe Arkansas, maybe Georgia too. I don't think we'll get 10. I think there will be at least 11, maybe 12. I think 14 at this point is pretty ambitious. Do I have any more losers? Oh, SMU. Listen, love the Ponies. Love Andy Enfield. For people who forget, Andy Enfield, the former USC coach, is at SMU. I'll tell you, very interesting resume. They had no quad 1 wins coming into this weekend, but no really bad losses. Well, they take a quad 2 loss at Stanford. Now, I think Stanford is improving. doesn't change the fact that it's a bad time to take this loss if you're SMU, because the bottom line is you have no great wins. I think they're sitting at like 21-8 right now, something like that, 21-9. But the truth of the matter is you just have no great wins. And if you have no great wins, it's hard to justify even in the ACC getting in. So this was a bad loss for SMU. You could not afford to take this loss, and you did. Finally, the Cincinnati Bearcats. Listen, you don't want to criticize them too much. They lost at Houston. And that game to me is more of a, if you had won it, it probably completely changes the way that we're looking at your resume. But they don't win it. Now they're 17-12, much like Baylor, Kansas State, and at Oklahoma State to end the regular season. I think they got to win both of those to even be in the conversation going into the Big 12 tournament. They don't have a ton of really good wins from the out of conference. So Cincinnati, in my opinion, on the outside looking in. All right. Tell you what, we have had quite a big show today. We've gone on for an hour and 20 minutes at this point. I think it's just time for us to get out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's call it a night. Cheers. This is just water, but my throat is dry. It's March, baby. I got to hydrate because we got a long month ahead. As I said, we will be with you. Well, I mean, we never take time off, but March Madness leads into the portal, crazy time of year. There's no slowing down now. So if you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres podcast, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure to rate and review the show as well. Give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Thank you to our partners, Cauli Puffs. They're incredible. We appreciate their support. More information, CauliPuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. Shout out to CauliPuffs.com. Also, BetUS, best deal going for a sports book in March, a 150% deposit match on your first deposit for first-time depositors. Use promo code YouTube150 at checkout. And then, oh, by the way, the second and third deposits, you also get a 125% deposit bonus as well. Time for me to go. Appreciate your support. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick. You F-head. Unblock me, bro. We'll be back Tuesday. Busy week ahead of college hoops. We'll start looking at conference tournaments. We'll start looking at, all the good stuff with college hoops. By the way, somebody's saying TJ Otzelberger to Indiana, so we might have to revisit the Indiana coaching search.